Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some of you and peace to the rest of you. Black heart sign and black in again. Like last time, I asked you to spread the message, whether or not you want to hit the like or subscribe button. If you know anybody that will benefit from what I'm telling you, please share it with them, because the message is more important than the messenger. And as I'm not getting any money off off YouTube, I don't want the fame through it. I just want the message to spread. Now, I previously said that I'm not going to sit up here and blame men because I don't have to. It's not really necessary. Not because men are never wrong, but because men pay when they are wrong, and men pay even when they're not wrong. If you're a man, you just have to pay more of a price for the feelings and the unhappiness of women. It doesn't really take much. You can be blamed for things you didn't do, and that's what sort of counterbalances that for which you may do and get away with, and really men don't get away with much. But there is something that is men's fault. And granted, I'm going to say that we were too simple to know this ahead of time, but now we've had time to sit back and observe. And I understand why it is that women want to reward men who don't use their brains. Although it takes a certain amount of brains, and even though a mentally impaired man is not attractive to women, women still want men that don't use their brains when it comes to women. So, on the flip side, a man has to be able to understand certain things about women in order to be able to attract them, which means he has to have something in his mind about women that women don't have about themselves. So it's really a quandary. It's a paradox. I believe that the paradox has more to do with our language and the limits of human language than it has to do with the actual paradoxical nature of what women want. But there is that element too, the paradoxical nature of women want. Women want what is not very common. And that really sums up what they're going to want. And this is an inbuilt recipe for their unhappiness. That which is rare and uncommon becomes that which they must have. So therefore, most of them must not have it. And then a few of them must be overjoyed and overwhelmed, while the rest of them are despondent. That's all I can see. And I'm talking mostly about Western women here. When it comes to Eastern women, you'd probably have to tell me. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, the fact remains that when you're looking at what women want and looking at what men want, we men are the ones who break our necks to acquire what women want and to be what women want. Women only go through great trouble to do two things: to look how men want and to one-up each other. That's it. Well, I take that back. I'm sorry, three things: to look the way men want, to compete with each other, and to get paid. Those are the things that they are going to really go out of their way to do. And get paid, when I say get paid, I mean a lot of them are going to go out of their way to get a heavy payday without work. And even though most of them do work in some sort of job, many do, you'll see that there's a level past which they're not going to work, but they're not going to accept that pay ceiling either. Again, I'm talking about Western women. Women have wanted me to blame men, and I have said no. And today I'm saying, okay, you know what? You got it. I said this in a previous recording, but it was it was not viewed. Not that much. And I'm saying now, men, this is that for which we are guilty, and women are not going to like me saying this either, but it's true. We're guilty because we have not demanded that women act their damn age if they look good. We were wrong for that. I don't know why we did it. I don't buy into the notion that women cannot behave as maturely as men. I believe they just simply haven't had to. I believe nobody's made them do it. At least not in any recent generations. Our own fathers raised our sisters in many cases, or they didn't. Our grandfathers raised our mothers, or in many cases they didn't, and our aunts. And whatever the case was, when women sat down, starting in the 1920s, but it got worse probably a little bit after the 50s, when women sat down watching these Disney princess movies, not even on TV back then, they were in the movie theaters. Something happened in their minds. Malcolm X pointed this out back in the 1950s and 60s when he was writing his autobiography. See, Malcolm, the same man who said that the least protected person in the United States is the black woman, Malcolm also said that there was something about them that was bothersome as all get out. He didn't believe in oppressing women, but he did realize that you got to watch them and you got to know certain things about them that are very fox-like and that are impossible to appreciate and say are just okay. He noticed this a long time ago. Did he oppress them? No. Did he love his wife? He did. But did he appreciate their foolishness and their childishness when it came to certain things? No. He said there's something in their nature that's corrupted. Girl, I told that chump to get lost. He quoted this in his, that's actually a quote of his. He was quoting things he'd heard women say in his autobiography. I never forget this. He didn't like that the black woman appeared to be the most unprotected there. And truth be told, black men at that time were more apt to protect black women than what we thought. But see, Malcolm was from the North. He was not from the South. And he was unaware that in the South at that time, black men were trying to keep black women out of demonstrations and marches so that they would not be brutalized. But our women were warriors, and I respect that about them when there's a time for it. But by the same token, there was a certain element of childishness that we even back then tolerated from them. And what did they do? They turned around, actually not even that generation of women that were in the struggle, but the later generations of women turned around and said, you men didn't protect us. Well, we as men are to blame for this largely because at the end of the day, one of the things that we did not do was that we did not tell these daughters of ours whom we love, these Disney princess movies are crap. And by the way, even if you look good, you still need to act your age. That's not something that we did. We did not focus on raising our daughters to be as accountable as we focused on raising our sons. First of all, we raised our sons and our daughters as though they were merely our children and not somebody else's future spouse. Now, we mothers and fathers are guilty of that. In the West in general, we failed in that regard. You have a son, great, that's my son. I'm gonna raise my son how I want, instead of thinking that you're also gonna raise your son how his wife would need and how his own kids, your grandchildren, would need. But on the flip side, same thing happened with the daughters. That's my daughter. I'm gonna raise my daughter how I want, instead of realizing that you're also raising somebody's future wife. At least we hope that you're raising someone's future wife if she chooses to go that route. She should at least have that option. And we raised them in such a way that they don't even have that option. So the men don't have that option. And why? Because they don't know about women. Not because they don't like them or anything. No, just they don't know about them. So, of course, they appear to drive women off because we don't know about women. We're not walking around here trying to push them off and irritate them and everything. No, we just don't know about them. Then when we do find out, we decide, well, I'm not going to deal with the complications. Why should I? But for the women, it's like, okay, we don't raise them to understand that men don't have a lot of the things that they want men to have if they watch these Disney princess movies and the Nickelodeon romance movies made for tweens, and then later on the teeny bopper movies, and then later on the soap operas where nothing is realistic. Not just not real, but not even realistic. I remember in the 90s, it seemed like there were characters always dying and then coming back. I didn't really die. Coming back from the dead. Seemed like that's what was going on back then. I remember a lot of that in the 90s. How many times comedians joked about it. How many times are these characters gonna come back from the dead in these soap operas? No wonder these women want men that ain't never gonna die. And God help us, because we assume that our daughters aren't watching these superhero movies. No, they're watching superhero movies. And in these superhero movies, there's certain messages being sent. Like, for instance, there's a reason that Superman has a love interest. She's human, he's superhuman. He's not even human. I mentioned that before in the previous ones. Did you also notice that Batman, the character Batman, he's a human being. He's just human. And he, despite his wealth, is by himself, and he has to adopt a son to help him do his job. He was an orphan, so he adopts an orphan. Forget about having a wife. Hell, even a girlfriend. Why? Because he's human. He's a regular man going through more pain than what Superman would have to go through in order to fight crime. So he has to adopt a son and train him in this, because he can't have his own. Because not only is he very busy, he is busy, but add to that, he is a man. He's a regular human being. And if he's a regular human being and he gets married, his wife gonna kill him. That's the end of Batman. Well, who took Batman down? How did the Joker do it? Oh no, see, Bruce Wayne was him the whole time, and Bruce Wayne's wife killed him. She poisoned him for the money. They couldn't even write the story differently than that because of how it would have had to turn out. That's why. That's what it boiled down to. And we didn't stop. We assumed that our daughters aren't watching these movies, and they are. And they're getting the same subconscious programming that anybody else would get. They're getting the same subconscious programming from these superhero movies that we think our sons are by themselves and enjoying, that they get from the Disney princess movies and the teeny bopper tween romance movies that are made for them. Wherein the guy that looks a certain way, the guy that looks older than all the other guys, also falls in love with a regular woman, a regular chick, a regular little girl. But she only takes the one that actually probably is too old to be in that grade. Because, hell, he looks too old. At the end of the day, bottom line is that the media has somewhat skewed a lot of this stuff, but also the upbringing hasn't. We men did not put a stop to it early on. That's why we men are in the trouble that we're in. And we didn't cause this intentionally. We were not active. We did not seek this out. It came, it got up and walked up to us and sought us out and knocked on our door and walked in the door even if we didn't answer it, and sat on our couches. So, this is what's our fault, man. And the thing is, I was about to record this, and as I logged into YouTube to do the recording, I saw that Coach Greg Adams had put something out similar, explaining what I was going to explain. And that is that women are not more mature than men. Little girls might be. They're at least able to follow directions and sit down more than little boys are, but by the same token, they're not more mature than men. Especially when they get, once they start realizing they're getting male attention. And what is the reason for that? Well, we men also are to blame partially for that. You can blame the women for not being mature because they still demand maturity in others. Now, for that, you can hold them accountable. But the lack of necessity for them to mature is our fault as men. We let them get away with not being mature. That is on us. That is our fault. How effing dare we be that stupid? This is why it is. See, young girls learn at a young age. They learn sometimes at 12, that they can get attention from guys even when these guys know how young these women are. These women learn they don't have to be women in order to get a man. But a man has to be a man in order to get not even a woman, but a girl. This is the message that's being reinforced. And it ain't most of us men that out here chasing underage girls. Most of us ain't even into that. But the fact is that there were a few of us who are out there doing that, and they're messing it up for the rest. Because if you notice, in many towns and cities, it's the same few guys. And if these women or these girls compare notes, it's the same few guys that they complain about paying a little bit too much extra attention to them. It'll be the same dudes. There was one guy who, in my hometown in Louisiana, he was kind of a public figure somewhat, but he was also in a wheelchair because he got caught peeping in somebody's window. and someone shot him thinking he was going to break in. He got paralyzed. He's still a freak. He's still telling young underage girls, I just won't see you take everything off. Now, you know, it's one dude. And several girls in high school had the same stories to tell. I remember being in ninth grade and one of my lady classmates told me about something he had said to her. Now, this is before we got into high school. He told her this. I don't know how they met. It was probably some community function. But this dude, he is supposed to be a community man, but he in a wheelchair and married, telling this little girl on the side somewhere when nobody else was around, I just won't see you take it off. Are you kidding me? We men make these things too easy. I never forget when, and we're trained to do it. We're socialized to do it. I know a friend of mine, 2 years older than me, I was in high school. He was about to finish high school. And I remember him telling me that he let this little 8th grade girl next door, he moved into a house on his own. He let this 8th grade girl next door put some baby oil in her hands and rub one out for him. He said when he nutted, she was like, ew, what's that? I heard this and I was damn near sick. Because he's otherwise a responsible guy. And actually, he has never done anything like that again, as far as everybody knows. But nonetheless, the point is that if the ages were reversed, back then, you could not have expected her to do this. Now, this was during the 90s. Nowadays, not sure. But back in those days, no, you could not have expected this. Why? Because we men don't hold them to standards similar to what they hold us to. And we have been socialized to not be too picky while letting them be picky. Glad that they picky. I mean, look, it's fine to be picky for the wrong reasons, but you got to be picky about things that you're also offering something in exchange for. So you're extra mature. You can be picky about somebody's maturity. You're extra hardworking, so you can be picky about someone at least not being lazy. You may be unrealistically industrious. Okay, well, your level of industry is unrealistic, but you have the right to be picky to at least avoid somebody else's laziness. Okay, fair enough. But we men have sat up here and we let them convince us that our dinglings carry a negative value because our dinglings stick out and theirs are internal. And therefore, you carry the negative value. Your dick is valueless. Matter of fact, it has a negative value associated with it. You got to pay someone for you to use it and do what they would want you to do with it in the first place. But you still got to pay afterwards. So what are you going to pay? Because, I mean, if you're going to pay, okay, fine. What are they going to pay? And see, I understand there are two ways to view this tricking thing. Now, as a Muslim, I'm not allowed to endorse it, but I understand that there are two ways to view it. And there's only one of them that you may actually have to do, not the other one. Some guys got to pay the women to do it. Other men have to pay the women to not bother them about it later on. But somewhere down the line, it's a price being extracted. And that's something that we're accountable for. That's on us. So, ladies, you wanted to hear something that men had done wrong. Well, here you go. We're wrong because we made it too goddamn easy. Especially for women that look good. And that's the reason why it is that women who have a certain look to them don't have to have a certain level of maturity. We did not demand it. Women will sit up there and demand a certain level of maturity from a guy even if he looks good. Now, if he looks rare and good, if he looks good in that rare Superman type of way, then that's when they drop all the standards. They break the rules for those guys. But, he looks alpha. You don't even have to behave it, especially in our community. But if he looks it, then, yeah, they might break the rules. But for others, they make the rules. Well, you're just a nice-looking guy. Okay, now they're making rules for you, weeding you out. And we let them. We're wrong for that. We're wrong because we sat back and said, well, I ain't had none in a long time, so I got to take what I can get. That's a psych-out game they ran on us. The most important sexual organ is not the genital, it's the brain. The second most important sexual organ is the genital. And I can tell you now, they're using their brains over the genitals to make sure that they do one thing all the time, and that is extract a price, one way or another. We, on the other hand, have not done that. We're sitting up here just readily paying the price to use the genital so that we can feel free to use our brains later, instead of saying, wait a minute, if we use the brain ahead of the genital, then okay, we have to come out of a price. We can also extract one from them too. That's what we failed in that regard. But you ain't getting no buns though. Well, you know, for women, I mean, we guys are sitting up here socializing each other wrong. That's the other thing we did wrong. We socialized our own young fellas wrong. You could tell a young guy before he hits puberty to have a value about himself, like like we tell these girls. Value yourself. You ain't, they're not the prize, and you're something low that has to pay twice the price as another guy to get half the results. That's not how it works. See, the women are told certain things and they follow them. The only time they don't follow them is if it is something that is going to be inconvenient for other men, especially for good men. Now, if their mothers told them certain things that were convenient for responsible men, then they might not follow that. But other than that, no, anything regarding difficulty towards men, they generally follow it. They do. They just go along with it. We're sitting up here telling our boys the opposite of what we tell the girls. Man, you better take as much as you can get. And I'm like, no, we need to stop that mess. We truly do. We need to stop this and start telling our sons when they're young, before they hit puberty, put it in their brains, which is the most important sexual organ, put it in their brains that they don't have to go out here and just give it away for free because they're a guy. As a matter of fact, they don't have to go out here and start paying to use it just because they're a guy. Start putting it in their minds that if you sit back and you watch women first before you try to get with them, you will understand why in many cases they should be trying to get with you. And if enough of you realize it, they will be trying to get with you, like what they're already doing when they're post-wall, but never pre-wall. Unless, of course, they already see enough others trying to get with you. You realize how shallow their natures are for all of their talk about being deep and mature. You're going to look at them and say, you're full of S. You're hypocrites. You should be convincing me to take a risk on you. You're not the one taking the risk. I'm the one taking the risk, especially in this legal environment. And while you're at it, why don't you all go and petition these courts and these legislators to change the divorce laws so that there'll be something in it for us if we do marry, instead of just sexless marriages and alimony payments after a divorce. A sexless marriage and then alimony after a divorce. Are you kidding me? The hell kind of deal is that for a guy? Oh, and you're going to cheat with the guy you really want in the first place. If we tell these young guys this, believe me, we think that they're just full of hormones and have no self-control. No, for one, we're not as full of hormones anymore as we used to be. They've already shown that the testosterone levels have gone down. Do you think the testosterone levels have gone down because of simple physical changes in people? No, it can't be that drastic. It's going down because of something in the brain. That's why. Something in the mind, something that men know has caused them to not need as much and therefore produce less testosterone. See, testosterone that produces muscles in the jawlines and the shoulders that the women like, it also produces the male libido. Well, the male libido is not as necessary anymore. It is rarely necessary nowadays. So why produce testosterone? And the women are pretty much saying, we don't want your libido, especially if you're just a normal guy. We don't want your libido. We want your muscles, your shoulders. We want you to labor for us and take care of us, but we don't want you trying to stick something in us and find relief in our vaginas. You're genetically inferior for that. Even though you're still genetically good enough to feed the kids, only a few of you are worthy of having your own biological children. There's only a few of you, and we're all going to have your kids, but for the rest of you guys, your labor, we need those things. We need your manhood for everything except sex, and that's not the way it's going to work. From verbal and psychological castration of women for the last 2 generations, especially the last generation intensively, you now have men producing less testosterone. And so goddamn what? However, we men are to blame because we allowed it. We tolerated childish crap from women when we were grown men and had to be mature. We were sitting up here tolerating childish crap from women because we wanted to hit that, failing to realize that they need the ding-a-ling. And if you do it right, you could be charging them. And if you can't charge them for sex the way many women feel, I can't charge a man for sex, but I can charge him to go away and quit bothering him. If you feel you can't charge for sex, you would be able to charge a woman for some other things. Can't charge them for sex? Okay, well, you can charge them for a sexual performance that you will limit to her and not someone else. And if you feel you can't limit it to her, you just stop taking her money. And that's what you do. Now, I'm not saying that this is how we should play the game. Like I said before, I've already said Islam is the solution, and I'm going to do another video on one of the evidences for it, which is the proper extent of male involvement of relatives when she's picking a man. The proper extent of involvement of male relatives when a female relative is choosing a man, preferably a husband. That's going to be another video, but right now, I do want to say that even though I can't tell you that this is how we should play the game, because really it's not supposed to be that big of a game in the first place. However, the fact is that because women insist on such, we men, if we were really smart and we were really fair and just, we would insist on something else ourselves. And that is, we would insist on being able to play the game that way, even if we chose not to do it. We would insist on that kind of power to play that game, even if we weren't playing that game. This is important. This is something that's got to be done. And I don't know why it is, but a lot of men in the West have not even considered thinking this way. Instead, socializing the sons to not be picky, take what you can get, and socializing the daughters to be completely picky and just turn them all, just find any reason, find any excuse. We men are to blame for that. And ladies, I knew you weren't going to like it, but you know what? Honestly, that's what it is. We just been too easy. Not only on women in general, but we start with our daughters. We were too easy on their mothers, and then we were too easy on these daughters. And then teaching our sons to make it too easy on somebody else's daughters. That is our fault, not this other stuff. Not the toxic masculinity, which is actually very rare and has been for generations. Not the chauvinism, which is also rare and has been for generations, although I admit it does exist. The fact remains that we're wrong because of things you would have never thought that we were wrong for doing. But that's what you wanted to hear. I hope this has been a benefit, you all. Assalamu alaikum. Black Heart, sign and black out. Spread the word.